Good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and get started again. And just before we go to our next official item on the agenda, we're going to hear from the chair of the Klamath Tribes, Chair Ray.
Zepketcha for this opportunity to speak. My name is William Ray Jr., the recently appointed Klamath Tribal Chairman of the Klamath, Modoc, and Huascan First Nations. We are honored to host the commission, Commissioner Chair Wall, Director Colbert. Thank you for the opportunity to be in our homelands of the Klamath. This area that you're in, we've been here in our legends forever. And the archaeological record is moving upwards towards over 18,000 years ago, which is all important to us because it shows our record of history is a long, long time being here. This area that you're sitting on was all had drought-resistant species of choke cherries, wild plum, which is the original Klamath wild plum, serviceberry, all the plants that we still gather today, but they're more limited than they were when we had our lands before 1961, when they were taken over by everyone, over 800,000 acres. So things have really changed drastically for us as a people and has adversely affected our cultures that has sustained us for thousands and thousands of years. We all talk about sacrifices that we are making in this world, and our people have sacrificed tremendously. It's refreshing to hear that people are finally recognizing those things that we have suffered and sacrificed, as evidence when the project was done, when they lowered the Klamath Lake, which created all kinds of predicaments for our watershed, along with the water fight, and then our loss of our salmon. So when we talk about the reintroduction of our salmon, we have a lot of things to think about as a people, because our native Tuam and Koptu fisheries are in serious, serious peril. Sure, we have hatcheries and everything, but as you know, talking with all the big river tribes on the Columbia, it's not like having native fish come back. So we will struggle with that also if that is lost. The termination area, which isn't talked about much in the 50s, set in motion a lot of social injustices that we've had to endure as a people. And it's no different than seeing our resources saying that we're not entitled to them, as with all the court cases that happened in the 70s, with our people being arrested for doing the original, exercising those original rights that we always had enjoyed for thousands and thousands of years, which none of us could understand. And growing up in that, my generation was the first generation after termination. So here again, I think moving forward, we have a lot of good things, good positive things. I don't really want to tell you the negative things because that's what I led into. But there's a lot of positive things that we can do together. And I hope that the state of Oregon and all the government that takes care of the state will recognize that they had a hand in termination to help us heal that and be there to help restore our watersheds and the thing that's most important to us, which is our resources to exercise our Aboriginal rights, because we believe that if that's all healthy, everyone's needs will be met. And I think that's the message that all the tribes in the Northwest are doing now, especially since Many of them have more resources to put towards restoration, and we're no different. We're going to keep building, being the second largest employer in Klamath County. We're going to continue to build on that economic so we can restore whenever we buy a piece of property, that we're going to be restoring it to the needs. And that means that it's going to be a benefit for the whole entire community of Klamath County and the state of Oregon. So collaboration and doing those things are important. A couple of things that I wanted to share in listening this morning. One of them is it's unfortunate that, of course, with the money shortage everywhere in government, that you have to make choices. And we get that. I get that in my own people. But I think there's some opportunity too to work with the tribes that are financially in pretty good places to maybe join partnership, ownership, whatever you want to call it, to take over some of the factories that might be in peril, moving upwards that the state owns over 18,000 because years I believe that they're still going to need a very viable, important part of our keeping our fisheries alive, along with setting in motion how we can make major improvements in the providing those fish cold, clean water. This area, so I really believe that we as tribes need to be more consulted with the resources that we have available to us, and here again, the Klamath Basin is going to receive drought-resistant species of choke cherries, our fair share of restoration work, which is the original based on the dams coming out. And here again, the first package went out, and it was 135.5 million. Limited, cooperating with the Yurok, the Karooks, downriver, and the water users and us. So that's the first batch that's going to be coming through. And we need to do more of that restoration work. And the state of Oregon needs to be a part our partner over in that. And we look forward to having you as our partner to restore these lands for the benefit of everyone. The mule deer, we've got to do some things to. We are very concerned and you'll get to that topic. We've been for decades about our mule deer with the winter range, how it's being managed, and our summer range, in areas where we used to have a lot of deer, like right here. I used to be able to bag a deer when I was a young man, at least one or two every year for my family, and now they're non-existent. And here again, we're not being smart when it comes to the habitat of all of our animals, because we're allowing all these subdivisions and all these other things that come in place where they really shouldn't be. I mean, when you have subdivisions that we have suffered and sacrificed forest area, it may be not the best place to have a subdivision, because it's going to take away those migrating herds, corridors, the habitats that they rely on. The project so we have to have those mule deer for our culture, which created for many of us that are sitting in this audience: Shane Foster, Brad Parrish, Les Anderson. We all grew up together, and we grew up with those mule deer. We didn't eat beef. It was that mullet that I'm talking about, and those deer and our roots and berries. Without that, there's no way for our culture to survive. And we're going to fight like heck to about keep what little we got left. Salmon, we have and a lot of things to think about as I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I welcome everyone to the homeland of the Klamaths, the Modocs, and the Huskins. And we look forward to a long-term relationship, since we're not going to go anywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And we appreciate it at least as much as that we even get to be here.
These
So
are in
thank you
serious, serious
for
peril.
welcoming us and for
Sure, we have
participating
hatcheries and everything,
yesterday
but as
in sharing what you know
talking with
and
all
what
the
you're doing.
Big River
It's
tribes on the
almost
Columbia, it's
overwhelming
not like
sometimes to
having
hear
native
all of the stuff
fish.
that's going on and that needs to get done. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Texted.
Oh, one second.
Is not working. No, it's not.
Oh,
So.
I thought it was about you, but it's about the
Come
YouTube
back.
that's not working apparently. So
we struggle,
thank you,
we will
Chair.
struggle with that also, if that is lost.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. It's an honor to
Yeah.
have you here.
Thank you.
You appreciate your comments very much. You bet.
So we are having technical
Determination
difficulties. We're
area,
waiting
which
for
isn't talked
the
about
vice
much
chair to
in the
get back
50s,
on.
set in
Becky,
motion a lot
Vice
of
Chair is
social
online.
injustices
What's
that
going on with
we've
the
had to
YouTube is
endure as a
YouTube gives us
people.
a time limit, and at that
And
point it
it's no
times out
different
and
than,
it creates a new link. So there's
seeing
a,
our
on the
resources
page, there's a
saying that
part
we're-
2 for
we're-
this
we're
meeting.
not entitled
And
to
we will,
them,
as
and-
long as this meeting will go, we will probably have a part 3. So if you go to the part 2 for this meeting, you'll be able to access the current live streaming.
Could you say that one more time, Michelle, in case people weren't, because the people that are online, we
as
want to make
with
sure they
all the
heard
court
that.
cases
So
that
when
happened in the
YouTube
70s,
times out, it creates a second
with our
part. So
people
right now,
being
we're working on a
arrested
part 2
for
of this meeting.
doing
So if
the
you're on
original-
YouTube, go to the
exercising
part
those
2,
original rights
and that is going
that we always
to
had
access the
enjoyed
live
for
stream.
thousands and thousands of years.
Thank you, Michelle. This has got to make your day even harder. Welcome to our staff who are ready to talk about the Mule Deer Plan. Brian, are you
Years,
going to introduce
which none of
yourself
us
and
could
the others and
understand
kick this
growing up
off?
in that. I was my generation was the first
There we go.
generation after
Yes,
termination.
yes, I'll introduce myself. Chair
so here
Wall,
again,
Vice Chair Hatfield
I
Hyde,
think
members of the
moving
commission,
forward,
Director Colbert. For
we
the
have,
record, I'm Brian Wolfer. I'm the Wildlife Division Deputy Administrator. With me today, I have Dr. Josh Smith. Josh is our Mule Deer Coordinator, and Dr. Don Whitaker. Don is our Ungulate Coordinator. Very
a lot
happy
of
to have the
good
opportunity
things,
to
good
present to
positive
you
things. I don't really wanna tell
our
you
Mule
the
Deer Plan,
negative
which was
things 'cause
last
that's what I led
adopted and
into, but
considered
there's
a
lot of
little more than
positive
20
things
years
that
ago.
we
And
can do
over that
together.
last 20 years, there's a
And I
lot
hope
that's changed
that
with mule deer, mule deer
state of Oregon-
populations, their habitat, some of the factors affecting them. But also a lot has changed in terms of the data that's available to us and the technology to collect information. And we've
And-
spent a
and
considerable
all
amount
the-
of
the
time
government
gathering
that-
information to help
that
inform
takes
how we
care of
can
the
better
state
manage mule deer.
recognize that they had a hand in
So
termination
today I'm
to
going to
help
give a
us
real
heal
brief introduction
and
and then I'm
being
going to
there
be
to
turning the
help restore
presentation
our
over
watershed.
to
And the
Dr.
thing
Whitaker.
that's most important.
And with that, we're going to focus a lot of our presentation because you heard from us earlier, I believe it was March, with an update on this. We've been working on this plan for
which is
about
our
2 years
resources
now, and so you've
to
had a number of
exercise
updates.
our
We're
original
really going to
rights,
focus our
because we believe
presentation
that if
on some of
that's
that
all
public
healthy,
outreach that we did and
everyone's
some of the
needs will be
changes
met.
that we've made since we were
I
last
think-
before you
I-
talking
I
about the
think that's
plan,
the
the
message
changes
that
that we
all
made
the
to incorporate some of that feedback, and that'll be the focus of our presentation. And I'll try not to overclick this thing and skip too many
Tribes in the
slides
Northwest
ahead.
are doing now, especially since many of
There we
them
go.
have
Um,
more resources to put to.
So I do want to set the stage
we're
for what
no
this plan
different.
does.
We're
This
gonna
plan
keep building, being the
is
second
really going to
largest
direct
employer in
our
town.
management as an agency for mule deer, how we're going to manage mule deer, what those best management practices are and utilization of best science. But as you know, this plan is very
County.
habitat heavy.
We're gonna
And
continue
as an
to
agency, we
build on
don't
that
own a lot of the mule
economic
deer
so we can
habitat. And when I say
restore
that, that's
whenever
not
we
to
buy
say
a piece of property
that
that we're gonna be
we're trying to pass the buck
restoring
to
it
landowners
to
and
the
land
needs,
managers,
and
but
that
this
means
plan
that's
we
gonna
view
be
as a way for
a
us
benefit
to
for the
communicate and
whole-
build partnerships. And we need to be much better as an agency at partnering with these land managers so that we can have some positive effects on mule deer and mule deer habitat. And we really recognize that within this plan. We also see it as a way to
Entire
communicate with
community of
and
Klamath
let
County.
the public
state of
know
Oregon.
what
So
we're focusing on mule deer so that we can
collaboration
have those partnerships and work on
doing
this
those things
mule
are
deer issue
important.
hand in hand
A
with
couple things that-
NGOs,
that I
interested
wanted to
members of the
share
public,
in listening this
tribes, et
morning.
cetera. So today in
one
this
of 'em is,
plan, we're going to be asking you to adopt the plan, and I want to be clear on what parts are going to be adopted. We've got some plans that the commission has adopted in their entirety, and others where it's goals and objectives. In this case, we're going to be asking you
unfortunate,
to
of
adopt
course,
the
with the
goals and
money
objective
shortage
for the
everywhere.
plan,
Right.
as well as the issues and strategies. And so we've
And we get
compiled all the
that. I
issues
get
and
that.
strategies into
And my own
chapter
people,
13.
But,
And then we've got the management objectives for both populations and buck ratios. And so what this does is it allows us, well, I'll say the plan is very long.
I think there's some
it's
opportunity too to work with the
200 pages now. A lot of that is background information, so that people can understand the researches out there that led us to these issues and strategies that we're focused on. But plans like that become very hard to incorporate new science in. And so what we're asking you to do is to really adopt those issues and strategies, and then we will not be able to adjust those without coming back through a public process. But we could, as new science comes, make some updates within the plan that's providing that information for the public about why we're doing what we're doing, if that makes sense.
Thank you. The goals, objectives, strategies, and issues without coming back, but that you could change the plan without coming back?
So Chair Wall, we could make updates to science, correct spelling errors, grammar, but it's really those actions that we're going to take.
Yes.
And those issues and strategies that we're asking you to adopt, and then that will be an administrative rule by reference.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Whitaker.
Thanks, Brian. For the record, I'm Don Whitaker. I'm the Ungulate Program Coordinator in the headquarters in Salem. I've been there almost 30 years now. So we'll start by talking about the process we've had, because we used a new process this year. The slide shows that the first webinar and draft chapter was released in January of 2022 or 2023. Josh and I actually started working on this plan with our preliminary and scoping and stuff like that in the middle of 2022. So we're well into 2 years into getting this process. As it shows, we posted our first chapter and started our webinars back in January and April. We conducted 5 webinars through February, the last one being the last one in January of 2024. What this did in this new process is we wanted to provide as much time and as much opportunity for people to review and comment on this plan as we absolutely could. That extended comment period was longer than a year, so that folks that are interested in mule deer have had over a year to review this. We took a chapter, section by section approach to give more time to focus on each of the individual components of the plan. It had been 20 years. There'd been a lot happened. There was a lot of information, and doing little pieces at a time, we hoped would be easier for folks, but we also, toward the end of it, combined everything together, conducted 3 public meetings, took input at those public meetings, adapted or modified the document, put it back out, and even the whole process included extending our scheduled date to bring it in front of you. We moved that 2 months to provide that much additional opportunity. One, for us to do a better job of reviewing and revising that plan in response to all the input, but also to give people more time to look at it. I'll go back a little bit to that previous slide. The revision of addressing the comments has been a big question that a lot of people have had. And one of the things that this process did is, as soon as the first chapter was put out and the history chapter was put out, we started getting comments immediately. Many of those comments addressed or were targeted at subjects or chapters that came later in our writing process. And as they came in early during the writing process, we were able to incorporate many of those comments as we wrote the subsequent chapters. That had an effect of actually minimizing some of the hard work in the combined document and the end of the document. After the final document was, or the the last revised document was posted and made available. Josh and I have been spending a considerable amount of our day job working on revising and improving that plan. There was also a follow-up with many of the folks that had commented with some targeted discussions, looking at talking to those groups and individuals that submitted comments where we could. We couldn't do all of them, but we tried very hard to follow up on many of these things. A lot of our revision focused on the categories where we received a lot of the comments. And if we look at the number of comments in email or written form, we received over 250 individual comments submitted, covering at least 200 unique subject areas. That's a lot to address. We had to go through a process, and that's why some of the time it took is we had to kind of organize those in general subject areas and then see how we could address with those. We were before you last in March of this year, and we presented a briefing there. We talked about 4 main subjects in that March briefing: the engagement process, habitat quality and changes to habitats, our herd ranges and harvest allocation, and then the changes to the management objectives. And we kind of finished that with what the generalized key subject areas where the majority of our comments were received, and that included harvest management, predation issues, management objectives, and habitat nutrition, and then the level of specificity that was in the plan. That was a pretty common comment from a number of folks. And so that's where a lot of our last detailed sections of revisions occurred, were in those that we presented to you in March. And at that point, I think I'll let Josh take over to finish us on our presentation part before we go into comments and questions.
Thanks. Good morning, Chair Wall, or good afternoon, Commissioners, Director Colbert. My name is Josh Smith. I am the Mule Deer Coordinator for ODFW. I will try and get through this pretty quickly here and save you guys some time, though. You know, Brian mentioned that this plan was really heavily related to habitat and really focused on some of those habitat changes. And really, this is probably from from the number of changes we made from that first revision or first draft to that revision, this is probably the chapter that got the most amount of looking and changes over that time. Some of those initial comments that we heard from what we had written was we really seemed to focus too much maybe on that northern forested ecosystem and not enough on that Intermountain West, what a lot of folks at Sage Step or kind of that Great Basin, what a lot of folks call, and kind of put together a little bit of map, kind of some of those drier areas. And there are differences in habitat needs and action items and issues that are facing each of those. Also, our issues and strategies, some of the comments we received really felt that we lacked some specificity, were a little too generic and broad. So in that revision process, we really expanded the information in detail related to the Intermountain West ecoregion in text and some of those unique things that are facing mule deer in that area. We also made some significant revisions to the issues and strategies section. We did add an Intermountain West section specifically and kind of broke apart the old issues and strategies and made those specifically related to the northern forest. This, again, allowed us to be more specific by ecoregion, really detailing some of those threats and how those are unique by different habitat types. We also changed the verbiage. We heard loud and clear that we did a much better job of being forceful and actually documenting what we recommend in, say, the anthropogenic section. So we borrowed some of that language to really get that across. This is what we as an agency recommend on for some of these land management agencies and stuff. Lastly, we took a much broader approach to addressing some of these issues. That first draft was really focused a lot more heavily on those on-the-ground action items, things like thinning, controlled burns, invasive species. And as Brian mentioned in his intro, we need to do a better job as an agency engaging with our land management partners. We really put a lot more on us and outlined how we as an agency need to coordinate at all levels, including, you know, at our leadership level, watershed level, and then down to our district level with our habitat bios and district bios, really working on these projects. We really outlined kind of a more of a tiered approach, if you will. Oh, sorry, pointing forward. I got it. Certainly one of the biggest topics we received comments on was related to predation. I think we had, somewhere right around 60 comments, unique comments related to that. And I put down 31 unique topics because just to point out that these were a bit nuanced. I mean, it wasn't just all X, Y, or Z. There's some nuances within those. And as I broke them down and kind of did I came up with about 31. So again, not universal. But some of those comments we heard was, predators are the cause of the decline. We saw a lot of this correlation between increases in cougar numbers and black bear numbers since the 90s, decreases in mule deer populations over that same time frame. But not only numbers, but also the predator guild. I mean, we've seen, wolves are now on the landscape. There are new species, especially since the 2003 revision. They're certainly getting a lot of attention. A lot of folks worried about how that may exacerbate these declines we're already observing. We also heard a lot, obviously, about cougars and specifically related to Measure 18. And as Don pointed out, a lot of these comments that came in related to these three topics that I've got, these first three here, those did come in early. So we did feel like we were able to address at least some of those in that first round of revisions. We really focused our revision process, I guess, if you will, on what we heard about the actual writing. And those things that we heard about that were really got a little bit more nuanced and really more down, specific, related to additive mortality and the burden of proof that would maybe need to be required. And there was also some uncertainty about some triggers for when we as an agency might actually implement management actions to actually do something about predator control, that sort of thing. So we did add some clarifying language to that, especially as it relates to additive mortality. And kind of teasing apart, certainly additive mortality is a big component of when those triggers would be implemented. But we really referenced some of this current research projects that we have going on that will help us understand how mule deer populations respond to variation in carnivore density under a range of environmental and habitat conditions and quality changes that will aid in guiding some of those future management actions. We also added a research section. Initially, this was just a monitoring section. We had several comments specifically wanting this, mainly as a way of continuing to document migration corridors or changes in those in response to various activities. I know, Sarah gave a talk about some of the things we do know and modeling, but there are a lot of data gaps, and we need to maintain those data sets to fill those in as we start observing things like climate change and those sort of things. There was also some questions about our commitment to continue collaring as a monitoring section. We talk a lot about modeling and getting away from collaring. And yes, where we can, we would like to reduce the amount of collaring to the levels necessary to effectively manage mule deer populations. Certainly, collaring animals comes with additional cost. It comes with additional potential risk for our contractors and our staff. And quite honestly, it comes for risk for mule deer as well. So, where we can, we would like to minimize that while, again, maintaining the data sets we need. This also allowed us to highlight some past research projects as well as ongoing efforts to understand things like competition with elk, working to understand best management practice for passage through solar farms and that sort of thing. Further, we realize the landscape is not static and things will change, and this requires us to be adaptive to those situations. And it is important for us to continue to document things like migration corridors in response to changes in traffic volumes, installation of crossing structures, again, climate change and those sort of things. So we do want to maintain those data sets, and this allowed us a chance to do that. One of the other big changes we made, and this is specifically changes to the management jet. We talked about those management objective structure here in March, but really we did make some pretty big changes to those as well. As you can see here from this top map, that original draft really had herd ranges coming out into two concern levels, a high and a moderate. We heard this version really lacked resolution, and there was some apprehension about that scoring matrix as well, not highlighting the sense of urgency mule deer populations warrant given some of the population trajectories we observed over the last 3 or 4 decades. So to address this, we changed the label terminology in our rankings to reflect that heightened concern we and the public feel. And you can see those. It goes from extreme, very high, high, moderate, and low. We also went from 4 categories to 5 categories, and this really allowed some more resolution as we look at those herd range rankings. The revised version now fall into 3, and we really believe this new management jet will facilitate more precise rankings and allow us and our partners to more efficiently allocate resources to herds that warrant more aggressive management actions. So we wrote over 200 and some pages, but the one thing we kept hearing, well, what are you going to do? So we heard that loud and clear, to be honest. And we really tried to work to get some more specificity within what that Appendix 2, what we're calling the herd range reports. And that example up here is just, obviously one example from one herd range in the Beulah Mount here. And we believe this allows us to do three things. It allows us to show what we are doing for mule deer on the ground in each herd range. It gives our partners an opportunity to see what we are doing and allow them to prioritize and facilitate greater collaboration. And it also holds us accountable to the public. The feedback on this change has been very positive. We do plan on updating these every few years to reflect the changes on the landscape, changes in our focus, and to focus on what we have accomplished. And to highlight how effective we have been in accomplishing what we said we would do previously, in fact, too. So several things that come with these. Ultimately, with this plan, we will modernize our management of mule deer, we hope. This document contains really the most Oregon-specific data of any wildlife management plan in the state. And although we are proposing some fairly big changes in this plan, we do believe bold actions are required as we look at the threats mule deer are facing around this state as well as throughout their range. Consequently, it is imperative that we implement fundamentally sound and scientifically based management of mule deer in order to address the many challenges this species is facing. We'll end it right there.
Thanks, Josh. And so if I can kind of wrap up and conclude, this was a long process for us, and we had a lot of public engagement through that process. And I think that public engagement, we tried really hard to treat those early chapters as a draft to make changes and incorporate. And I want to applaud Josh and Don and the rest of the team for doing that. But I also want to thank the public, because those comments, we feel that what we have before you now today is a much stronger plan because of that engagement. A lot of suggestions came in that we were able to incorporate, and I think make a stronger plan that's easier for the public to see what we want to do, much clearer, and really